Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another electrifying episode of Take It EV, the podcast that takes you on a journey into the world of electric vehicles. I'm your host, Greg, and we have a remarkable interview to share with you today. In this episode, we are diving into an exciting topic that is shaping the future of electric mobility. We have a special guest joining us today. Please give a warm welcome to Justin, Managing Director at Swarco Charging, a renowned name in the electric car charging industry. Justin will be taking us on a fascinating exploration of Dundee's charging hub and the thriving business of electric car charging. Dundee, located in Scotland, has become a prominent hub for electric vehicle enthusiasts and business alike. The charging infrastructure in the city has witnessed incredible advancements, setting an example for sustainable transportation solutions, a very inspiring one. So grab your headphones, sit back, and get ready to be enlightened as we uncover the details behind the Dundee's impressive charging hub. We'll dive into the all the technology and all the stories behind the hub itself. We begin the conversation with all the sorts of questions about charging business and difficulties and the beauties of the whole industry. So you're in for a treat. Justin was again very, very generous with his time, so I would like to thank him. Just so you know, this recording started as we were supposed to be talking about Dundee's hub and Dundee as a council and their investment in a charging infrastructure and sustainability. However, for technical reasons, we couldn't get anybody from Dundee to dial in, so we just started chatting about Swarco. So this episode is mostly us talking about Swarco, and we do talk about Dundee towards the end. But it's a fascinating discussion. Before we start, though, I would like to thank today's sponsor, which is all my amazing patrons. You guys are awesome. If you want to join their ranks, the links are in the doobly-doos down below. Just another housekeeping item. If you have any comments, any feedback, any questions, suggestions, etc., just email me. takeitev@gmail.com is the best way to do that. I really, really enjoy hearing from you guys. And of course, if you're listening to this episode and this is your first time, subscribe. Look back at the previous catalogue of episodes. We got some amazing things like Quentin Wilson. We have Jordan Brompton from My Energy. We have I have spoke to physicist Michael about climate change and the science behind it. It's a fascinating episode that doesn't require you to be science-minded. He speaks very clearly and reveals all the history behind it. I was very, very happy to chat to him too. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the episode and discover the electrifying wonders of the Dundee Charging Hub and the thriving electric car charging business with our fantastic guest, Justin.
It's very, very exciting site that I think it's just very different in terms of some of the sites we have deployed. There's just a few unique additional sort of features to the site itself. So
you mentioned all the key metrics are good and stuff, Justin. But what are those key metrics? Just out of curiosity, how do you measure success? In your business, I'm always curious about these things.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like other business, I suppose. It's all about the numbers. Is the business growing, according to our projected growth? Yes. Is the business hitting our profitability targets and objectives there? Yes. But then you look at all your other key performance indicators, like how the networks are performing out there to the driver community, the infrastructure that we maintain on behalf of the charge point owners. Are we performing to those expected? So operationally, are we hitting those key metrics for our customers? And the simple answer is yes. So we're very excited about how we're performing, both from a business performance perspective the numbers, but then also how we're performing in the eyes of our customers.
Yeah, that's the bit that I'm curious about. Is how does the charge point operator, or I don't know how you would place yourself, but I would classify you as a charge point operator. I don't know if that's correct or not, but you tell me. But the I spoke to so many in the past, and they all kind of do things differently and have different goals. Some of them just put the charging points and then operate them on behalf of a customer. Others just lease the land from somebody and put the point, and anything in between. And these days the key marker when it comes to charging point performance is how reliable are they, and if there's enough of them to when there's a peak demand, because nobody cares when they're sitting there in the morning on Monday and nobody's using them, but when it's a public holiday and everybody's queuing up, are they fast, are they
Yeah, Greg, I mean, we've effectively we've got the different types of EV businesses out there. There's pure CPOs. So obviously with their own funding, going out there and deploying their own charging network, operating it, etc. Some of them have those services in-house. Some of them subcontract some of those services. But then you have others who are pure sort of equipment service selling onto customers who effectively own the infrastructure. And then you have companies like ourselves who do both. So effectively our business has been built up over the years since 2010 through the one model, which is customer funded. So effectively, we refer to that as our core business today. So all of the infrastructure we've deployed out there up until now is effectively customer owned, not owned by Swarco.
Okay.
But we have been contracted to deliver the network, and we continue to maintain that infrastructure on behalf of those charge point owners.
Okay.
And then obviously you have CPO, which is more of that is our investments network, where we launched it recently, 3 weeks ago, Power and Go by Swarco, POGO for short. And that is where we will start to build our own sort of fully funded charging network. Two very different models that we have within the business: customer funded, and then we have our investments or CPO business. So to us, all of our key metrics today out there in terms of how we are performing are based on infrastructure not particularly owned by Swarco yet.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have different contractual arrangements so if you look at all the infrastructure we've deployed out there, we've deployed over 10,000 charging stations over the past 12 years. Some of them are public, a big portion of them are public, and a big portion of those are privately accessible. So the public charging infrastructure, those will be the likes of some of the major CPOs out there. For example, Motor Fuel Group, Osprey, a very big part of Osprey's network is equipment from Swarco. We maintain those networks, both of those networks, with our service engineer base. The SSC, another CPO, we supply products, services, and we maintain their infrastructure as well. And then there are a few other sort of CPOs, like the likes of BEV in Manchester, where we would have supplied that product, and we currently maintain it today with our service engineer base. So we look at our key metrics of effectively our core business and how we're performing. It is those customers that we have to answer to with respect to how we are performing against the key performance indicators that they set for us.
I mean, this is all upcoming stuff, this is all growth market at the moment, and things are not set in stone, and people don't know how these things work, including myself.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably one of the challenges that we have is that we've deployed a lot of infrastructure out there over the 12-year period. There is actually, it's actually fascinating to see the level of focus from the owners of that infrastructure. Some are absolutely key focus is product in the ground, working at all times. Okay, and obviously your major CPOs, because it's their money and they take that very, very seriously, and ultimately they have specific SLAs and KPIs with us where we have to perform to their expected level. But then you have other charge point owners, and some of these may be private businesses, not necessarily CPOs, or they may be local authorities where actually there isn't the maintenance contract in place. It's come to the end of their term, and for some reason or other, they've decided not to continue with the ongoing maintenance because it's effectively a cost and maybe they don't have budget for it. And then we have infrastructure out there that may not be in a maintenance contract, or the customer has decided to switch it off. So we have those challenges that it's got our badge on there. We're not servicing it for that reason, but ultimately if that unit is switched off or not working, then ultimately whoever's name's on the badge or even the back office gets really scrutinized for that. So we do take, not only us, so a lot of all the infrastructure suppliers do get targeted, probably unfairly, I'd say, in those situations where you have that no maintenance contract, or the customers decided to turn it off because they can't continue to operate it. So I suppose those are the challenges that we have to deal with, because actually it gives us, it can sort of give all the various different infrastructure suppliers that bad name if you've got a driver that's gone to that charger that really expects to charge their vehicle and they haven't been able to do that. They don't know the detail behind the scenes. They just know that charger with that badge on it is underperforming. And that is one of the challenges that we've seen in the sector.
It's a fair question when you turn up at the charger and it doesn't work. Or, it will be great if it just doesn't work, like the power is off, but you're expected to have an app. I know it's not true as much today, but in the past you had to go through the whole dance of actually downloading an app, putting your details, signing off your mortgage, whatever. Like the questions that you would be asked when you sign up to those apps is like your home address and your date of birth, things that a charge point operator should not really care about. So that's like the one of those questions that I get all the time is, why do I have to go through all this stuff? Why can't I just give you the contactless and just get charged? But the other question that I always get is like, okay, the charger is turned on, I can see it running, I sign up with the app, and the app tells me it cannot communicate with the charger, but I'm standing next to it and the screen is on, and I can do things on the touch screen. Like these are the sort of the frustrations that people have. It'll be different when it's just like completely off, and it's obvious that it's off, but it's different to what people usually get. Like how do you maintain that? How do you ensure that I don't know how to describe it from like an IT perspective, but like it's not that the charger doesn't work. It appears to be working, but it's unreachable by the CPO. Like, how do you address these sort of things?
There is in order for sort of the software solution to be speaking with the device itself, obviously there needs to be a strong SIM card connection to enable that sort of clear communication between the two devices. So ultimately, if a charge point has been installed in a location where the SIM, so the network, is of very poor strength, then you will have challenges. I think what's really important as part of any survey that we carry out, so the site survey before you have infrastructure deployed, is that you're actually doing that test. You're doing a thorough test to understand if there is a really strong signal strength at that charge point location. And actually, we have in the past turned down deploying infrastructure at sites where there isn't strong enough signal. Or we've put measures in place to improve the strength of the connectivity. So I think that's really important. The site survey process for us is crucial because it determines so much. It determines where power is going to come from. It determines if there's sufficient power, how much power you need to bring onto the site if there's insufficient power, whether there's a strong signal strength there for your SIM card to have constant connectivity with between the charger and the back office. So really important. I'm a strong believer of contactless being a solution that is needed. I think predominantly on your DC charging infrastructure. I think it's important. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure deployed out there without any contactless on it. Okay, those chargers potentially would need to be upgraded to include the contactless device. But easier said than done. Who's going to be paying for that? And what we have is some hosts just refuse to pay for that because it is a cost.
Yeah.
What's the return on that for some of those charge point owners? And that always is the question for them, with the budget constraints, etc., and the cost of actually upgrading a charger to include contactless. So those are some of the challenges that we have on making sure that there is contactless on some of the legacy equipment deployed out there. But most of the new DC infrastructure being deployed, if not all, do include contactless now and have done probably for at least 12 to 24 months, certainly from our perspective.
Okay. The other question that, I get loads of questions, but like the other question that I often get is, why don't you stop people from charging over, say, 80%? Pick your figure. But quite often new owners will turn up in whatever car that they just had for a week, or they're on the first excursion somewhere and they just have to do 100%, and there's a queue of cars waiting. And I haven't been guilty of charging to 100% on a rapid charger, but I've sometimes had to charge 90% when I used to drive a Nissan Leaf. 30 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf. Obviously, Nissan Leaf kind of charges quickly to about 92%, depending on the loads of things. So I had people approaching me and giving me snarky, questions like, "Do you know it's slower after?" But I do wonder if at some point as a charge point operator, it's too slow for you to make any money. With the guy charging or lady charging there at like say 10 kilowatts. And somebody else might be plugging in and charging at 70 or 80 or whatever. So it might be useful to just give them a message saying, "Sorry, buddy, but it looks like you're charging too slow. You're sufficient. You've got sufficient charge. Next charger is blah blah blah. If you want to keep going, or I don't know. I don't know what is the solution. Like, would you be able to speak to that or?"
Yes, I think it's important to realize that from 80% onwards, there is naturally going to be that sort of slowdown, with a reduced power going into the vehicle, obviously, because the vehicle is programmed that way to avoid it from overheating during the charging process.
Yeah.
So, when that happens, we have different CPOs having a different view on that or taking a different position. Some, choosing to completely switch off at 80%. Some allowing it to go to at least 90 and some all the way to the 100. These are quite big investments. The cost into deploying infrastructure, certainly the higher powered rapids, can be quite significant. And, the operator would always be striving towards making sure that they see a reasonable return on investment.
Yeah.
So if, for example, you had a hub where 10 bays and actually all 10 drivers were, decided to sit on the charger for another hour and a half, whilst nobody else coming onto that site was able to charge because all those drivers wanted to get from 80% to 100%. That's not good for our industry. It's not good for the promotion of EV and the uptake of EV. It creates a negative perception because it creates frustration for the driver. I think it's about finding that balance of 80% is a good mark to hit in terms of making sure drivers have really sufficient battery sort of top up to go out and make their journey, but also making sure that you're effectively accommodating those that actually want to get to a 90 or 100. It's not an easy one to resolve. However, I think as long as drivers need to realize is that there are big investments being made, and obviously the CPOs out there, don't want to have their drivers parked up for, lengthy periods of time where hardly any energy is being delivered through that charging infrastructure.
Yeah, I do wonder if it's just a perception. It's one of those biases where you see something happening like this occasionally, and you think everybody does it, or whether actually it happens quite often. Somebody should should share the numbers basically and say this is how many people actually charge over 80%. I'm sure if it was a widespread problem, you would be doing much more media campaigning, or even put stickers on the machines to say don't charge over 80%. But I'm sure you don't have the numbers at your fingertip at the moment. But I'll be curious to find out what is the actual.
With some of the bigger wholesale kind of CPOs, I mean, they'd have all the data to provide. I think that there is a balance to be struck here from the CPOs. Of course, return on investment is important, but customer service to the CPOs is also equally important. I think they'd be naturally trying to find that balance between making sure that they're protecting their investment, but then actually they're making sure that their drivers receive a good quality service.
Yeah.
So, and that's the challenge for CPOs is sort of finding that middle ground between the two. And I personally think that an 80% top up is where most drivers are topping up and deciding, okay, well, I need to be on the road again. I'm not prepared to wait another hour or even more to get to 100%. And they so you'll probably find there's actually a smaller percentage of EV drivers actually waiting to get all the way through to the 100%, unless they got a lot of time to kill. And we do see that. We do see that there are some drivers that have lots of time and they can wait. But I think there's a fair portion of drivers when they hit the 80, they've got things to do and they move on.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. If you don't, I assume that if you haven't heard about this problem too much, it doesn't happen as much as people seem to think it does. So,
and I think whilst we provide a service to to some of the CPOs out there, and they're sort of valued customers of ours, so we do give them a lot of attention from a product supply, product reliability, and service perspective, as well as ongoing account management. But what we're not close to is the data. On those networks, it's their data, they protect it. So actually, sort of how many of their customers do charge to 80% and leave, or how many of them actually charge all the way to 100%? They'll have that data. We don't have that. But actually, whilst we start to build Pogo, we will start to see how drivers behave with respect to, the 80 versus 100 stay time on the sites.
I live in Tunbridge, as you know. I think we do have a couple of Swarco chargers in Tunbridge Wells and Sevenoaks. Are these council owned, or because I think they're taxi only? It says on it.
So that infrastructure will be owned by those respective local authorities.
Okay. Is that how do you enforce that it's taxis only? Because I think it's just a contactless payment terminal, as far as I could tell. I don't think. Well, I never had the need to use it because obviously I'm like 10 miles away. but I do see sometimes private cars plugging in. I don't know how successful they are, but are they just? Can anybody just use them, or do you need to apply to a council and be a taxi driver to actually use it?
Yeah, so they were deployed as part of the ultra low emission vehicle taxi scheme. We're seeing obviously. Driving the uptake and supporting with the uptake of EVs. Some of the local authorities within Kent have also recognised that actually we need to be opening it up to other drivers. So we are seeing some of the local authorities say, okay, well, we've tried the taxi only. Okay, there's some utilisation there. Let's start to open it up. So in terms of Tunbridge specifically, I'm not sure as to what decision they've made on that. We actually are starting to see it open up, and some of them are opening it up for specific times. So actually open to the public specific times, and then sort of taxi operating times, whatever that may be. I'm not sure, but
Friday night.
So for their use only. So we're just seeing. I mean, what's key is that from a software hardware functionality perspective, we can accommodate those rather unique requests. So. Yeah, and that's obviously we do offer that unique sort of kind of access functionality, which helps them to be able to allow everyone to charge at certain times, but then restrict it at others.
Okay, and the because I know companies like Osprey that you mentioned. I know that the I don't know about this Instavolt and a couple of others. I know the Osprey specifically is kind of prepared to if you give them a site, they're prepared just to put in the charging point for their own money and kind of operate it. And they probably chose likes of yourself to to put some of them in. But do you take requests for like that from councils or private landowners as well, or would you direct them to likes of Osprey? Somebody?
Yeah, I think we have in the past directed to some of our CPO partners. Sometimes those projects are a fit, others they're not a fit for them. In some occasions we have match funded. So we've match funded, say, 25% of total project costs. We've done that in the past, where we think it suits us. But then obviously we have the separate business, which is our POGO business. Our POGO business they're identifying sort of fully funded opportunities. Of course, some of them will be local authorities, but actually most of that activity will be private sector focused. But yeah, of course, there will be some local authority activity there. So I think, whilst we have strategic CPO partners, we'll continue to share investment opportunities with them if we feel that the investment itself is more applicable to their strategy. If we see an investment opportunity that's applicable to our strategy, then of course we will look to fund it ourselves. So we just take each project case by case basis.
Okay. I have all sorts of like business related questions, but I don't want to bore you with that too much because I don't want to overstep, But like I often get asked, how long does it take? What is the return on investment on the site? And I when I spoke to somebody from Osprey last time, a couple of years ago, they said it costs about 50K to. On average, to put 2 chargers in. I presume that will take a while to recover. It's a very long-term investment to put in even 2 chargers. Obviously, with somebody like council or local authority, they might have different goals, right? They just want to enable the infrastructure so that people buy electric cars and kind of switch over to electric or sustainable transportation. But with private landowners, obviously they've got they might have another, I don't know, they might have a coffee shop or supermarket nearby. That's another, obviously, thing. But like purely just from having a charge point, what do you reckon is the return on investment? Like, can you speak to that, or is that an unknown?
It is. Well, it's an unknown because what is the quality of the site? So, and how much investment are you putting in? So if it's a local authority, is it 25%, 50%? Is it 75%? Or is it 100%? We've seen all those various different models exist. Are you fully funding it? If so, what does that return look like? A key requirement to understand when deciding whether to invest or not is the length of term. So local authorities looking for a big investment with a 5-year contract term doesn't make sense, certainly for us. And I doubt it'll make sense for the other CPOs out there, because you're not going to see a return on investment unless the site is incredible in terms of quality. I mean, So, and of course you have different return on investment projects, ranging from, sort of could be 4 years all the way up to 12 years. It all depends on the type of infrastructure you've deployed, how many units, what the respective total project cost or deployment cost is, and what the utilization is. So there's a number of factors that actually decide, how quickly you're going to see a return on investment. So it's a very broad sort of, area in terms of the return on investment. Yeah. Depending on all of those factors. So I couldn't give you a specific date, specific timing, but you've got a banding, and it's, sort of extremely impressive level all the way through to, not impressive and lengthy. So,
I mean, I've been to sites, Swarco specifically, branded chargers. I don't know who owns them or what the arrangement is. Obviously, as a user, you don't care. You just want to plug in, but I always make sure that when I go to a restaurant, a pub, or whatever it is that has a charger up out in the door, I always tell them, look, I stopped here because you have a charger. I would have otherwise gone somewhere else, probably. Who knows? But but you've got a charger. I can eat my lunch, dinner, whatever, in half an hour, 45 minutes, and charge. And I always kind of tell people that just make sure that you kind of tell the operators or the owners of the land that you're here because the charger, so they can put in more potentially. But the because we were supposed to be talking about hubs and stuff. And small sites is one thing where you're stopping for dinner when you're on the way somewhere. There's usually just one or two chargers, which is sometimes not enough these days. On the other end of the spectrum, that's what I was about to say, you have places like GridServe, where they have 20 plus chargers. Where do you think the sweet spot lies, and what do you think is the future? Because personally, I have to say that I like the sites like the GridServe where you can stop for longer. I wish they had restaurants on site. That's one thing that they don't have. But they have plenty of shops and things to do, entertainment, meeting rooms, whatever. Where do you think the future lies with these things?
Well, I think it's finding that sweet spot, and if you look at some of the operators, they've gone with more of a cautious approach. Maybe very much based on whether they have sufficient investment to go sort of large scale initially, and they're just trying to sort of balance out the investment they have to deploy. That may play a role, not sure. But then obviously you've got that kind of sort of 5 to 10 bays for a hub, which is sort of in the middle of between the sort of lower end and possibly the GridServe end. And then you've got the GridServe, and I think they're not the only ones doing that. And I think it is quite impressive when you see the infrastructure that they're deploying on these sites. I think it sends a really strong message that this sector is certainly the future. I think it plays a positive role on the uptake of electric vehicles, which is really what we are looking to encourage and support. So no, I think no way is the wrong way, I suppose. Just providing infrastructure, whatever the quantity. I think the site plays a crucial role. So if you do have a site where there's amenities, good quality, sort of whether they sort of shops and places to eat and toilets and etc., good lighting, and it's potentially a really good hub site, deploying, 10 to 20 bays, it's a big investment. It's a big commitment early on. And I think it is positive to see that the scale being deployed. I think the reality is probably today, again, very much depends on what type of site. If you've got motorway sites, motorway service station sites, then I think they're going to be incredibly busy, up to 20 bays. We've seen that at some of the motorway locations. But you're going to have other sites like maybe shopping facilities, retail parks, sort of a 5 to 10 bay provision today, ultra rapid. Yeah, I think it's good enough today. But obviously, you'll probably be expanding that network within the next, say, 3 to 5 years, gradually, maybe sooner. So no, I think there's no sort of wrong approach. Like I say, every approach works for a specific location.
Yeah, I personally see that the future is having a large site with 20 chargers, and if you think about it, even if the cars are going to charge in the future, say in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and you're going to have 400-mile range, you're still going to have to stop to have just to go to the toilet or just to have a lunch, and you're going to want to spend that time doing something rather than just sitting in the car and scrolling on your phone. And if you think about the petrol station model where they make money actually in the shop rather than selling you the fuel, when you have to sit there for 20 minutes, you're going to spend more money potentially. So there's the chances of monetizing it and actually making money are higher, and you can have different type of shop. You no longer just have a convenience store, but you can have a actual proper whatever type of store you want. The other thing that is often missing is a space just to sit down and relax at those service stations. But Yeah, because I'm always curious. Like, obviously, the other thing that is restricting at the moment is probably the grid connectivity, but I'm sure people at national grid. I mean, I know in fact that they've been working on it. What do you think are the challenges, like apart from the grid connectivity, in expanding the network? Because I think we're hitting the point where the adoption curve is kind of almost exceeding the number of charging points that are currently provisioned. I'm sure there's plenty in the works, but I see quite often when I travel at like high peak times that there is a queue on site. And I wonder, I'm sure you guys see that as well. What do you think is the solution there? Like, is it more charging points? Is it better signage, or discoverability basically, or do we just need to have more chargers within a certain area?
I think from a positive perspective, there's a lot of infrastructure being deployed. There's a lot that's being developed, planned behind the scenes that the driver won't be particularly aware of. All the CPOs have committed to making some really big investments into expanding their respective networks. So what we are going to see over the next 6, 12, 24 months and sort of, through to the next 3-5 years is quite significant deployment of charging infrastructure. I think as a driver, where you're not sort of close to the detail day to day in terms of what conversations are having with respect to infrastructure deployment, there's a lot going on there. It's very active. There's some big investors that have come in with genuine money to deploy. So I think that we are going to see quite a significant expansion of the network, public network. If we look at the challenges, one of the very big challenges, and still today is power. Going back to the point that you've mentioned there. So that's the power availability, one thing, but then also the cost of power. So the more infrastructure you deploy on a single site, the greater the cost. And actually the costs go up quite significantly. So as a CPO, you need to be really prepared, to make in some cases, make a substantial investment into a site. If you plan to deploy a lot of infrastructure on that site, because that will come with some pretty hefty costs. So that is still the challenge and the bottleneck with regards to deployment of infrastructure. If all the power is there and we were coming along and just sort of, dropping chargers on the ground and plugging in, we'd see double the size of the network that we see today.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And it is a challenge. I think the DNOs are working a lot more cooperatively with the various CPOs. We now have IDNOs and ICPs, and they all play their part in making sure that actually we're delivering infrastructure quicker. Okay. But it still remains the bottleneck, because you'd be surprised how many sites CPOs actually walk away from because the costs are too extortionate. So yeah, I think that's probably the main challenge. I think there has been a challenge within the industry with respect to the availability of finished goods product, so charging equipment, charging stations, because of the global supply chain constraints, through some of the sort of key components that are used to building, DC charging infrastructure. That has had a negative impact on the supply from the major technology manufacturers through to the CPOs. And that has played a role in slowing down the deployment of infrastructure, but not as nearly as much as the power-related concern.
Okay. I think the global chip shortage, which I think it's coming to an end. Like the major manufacturers like ST and others have ramped up their production again and kind of get the stock back currently. So I hope this is going to be the tail end of that complaint.
But you can do things to mitigate it, Greg. So as a business, because we part of Swarco, which is a large sort of corporate global group. they have really backed us by sort of enabling us to hold quite significant levels of finished goods stock in our warehouse in Hemel Hempstead. And so we will have anywhere between 80 to 100, 150 kilowatt units plus in stock at any point in time, which is great because we have customers that come to us and they need, sort of urgent need of our product, and we're able to very quickly accommodate those requests.
That's good.
Ultimately, it has a negative impact on cash flow, of course. So the net working capital is falls through the floor to a degree in terms of the actual versus target, but ultimately the business is very supportive of us in this growth sector, growth business, and the need to rapidly be able to support our customer needs from a product supply perspective. So, and then on our AC equipment, we hold anywhere between 300 and 500 AC posts in stock as well. So that if you take all of that cost into consideration, I can assure you it's a sizable value that we hold here in the UK, so that we can effectively support the needs from our customers.
Speaking of hardware, one of the things that people often see, and I think I know the answer to that question, but I'm curious anyway. We've seen this when some operators, they put in the charging point or 2 charging points, and it works fine for a year. And then after a year, it just becomes, the screen's broken, or, the colors are off on it, or, I don't know, the cable is wonky and pins fall out, whatever. It's no longer usable, and nothing happens to it. And I presume it's because nobody is paying to maintain it. But quite often, at least in the early days of EV driving, I've heard that the charging points just don't last more than a year or two, and they have to be either swapped entirely, which costs loads of money, or the maintenance is just too expensive. Are these sort of things improving? I mean, if I think about charging operators like Osprey, I don't think I've ever seen their charger after a year or two falling apart. But there's been other charge operators like Polar or what is the network that they bought another network ages ago. Charge Your Car, I think it was called, or something like that. And those sites are just falling apart, just rusting and just unusable. Do you think the charging point manufacturers are improving those things, or do you think it's just because we don't have any in the UK? We don't have many sites with canopies, or the charging points are just open basically up to elements and not shielded in any way. What can you talk about in that sort of regard?
See, what I can say is where we see a charge point operator owning the infrastructure. So if you likes of Motor Fuel Group, Osprey, Instavolt, some of those pure CPOs, and there's a few others, of course. Obviously, sort of BP will also own their infrastructure. There is a very, very high degree of focus in making sure the infrastructure is well maintained. GridServe is another. So because it's their investment, and they ultimately need to ensure that the infrastructure is working at all times, so that the utilization is there and their drivers have a really good satisfaction or customer experience. So, and I think the challenge for the industry, and the challenge for the likes of even ourselves, Swarco, and the challenge for those that have possibly been around a lot longer than the others. We've sort of ChargeMaster, PodPoint, Swarco, we've been around for 12 years. The sort of emergence of CPOs is probably sort of 4 or 5 years. So there's the early stages they went around. So actually a lot of legacy equipment was installed in those early days. Even the old plugged in places program, where some of that infrastructure is still installed, where it wasn't particularly, it's not owned by any of the names. It's not owned by Swarco. It's not owned by BP. It's not owned by PodPoint. So the good fair portion of their estate isn't owned by them or us. But ultimately, it's owned by either a local authority or a private business that has chosen not to continue to have it maintained. So there's only, and it goes back to the point I mentioned earlier, is that if your product has a badge on it, yeah, to the driver, you're the CPO.
Yeah.
Straight away. But actually, there's a huge portion. In fact, the whole of the eConnect network today is owned by hosts. So it's owned by hosts that have different expectations with respect to how their infrastructure should be working, or whether they can actually fund it. So I think the challenge that we have is that there is a lot of infrastructure out there that may not be in a maintenance contract because of those reasons, but ultimately it has our badge on it. So as a driver, you're rocking up and you're really peed off because that charger that has got Swarco on it is out of service. And you're automatically going to be very frustrated with Swarco or with eConnect. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Swarco or eConnect have the role to play in making sure that equipment is in service all the time. We do if we contract to. So if the customer contracts to make sure that we're achieving specific SLAs, absolutely, we will give it all its focus. But if it's old legacy equipment where the customers decided to maintain it themselves or to not maintain it at all, we can't control the performance of that charger. But to the driver, it's that operator that they become frustrated with.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like the questions that I'm going to hear from people or getting emails or tweets from is basically like, why doesn't anybody take all of this under one roof and just kind of deliver end to end? I know Polar was trying to, they even started developing their own chargers, and that with the billions that they have backing them, they're still failing at it, which I personally don't know how that happens. But I'm not going to comment on that because I don't know. But the do you think one day this is going to be a bit more integrated, but end to end? Because it boggles my mind that somebody wants to have a charger on their site that doesn't work or isn't maintained. Like that seems all shades of wrong. And I get that budgetary constraints might be one thing, but like I say, if somebody rocks up to that charger and it doesn't work, they're going to either drive off somewhere else, so they're not going to probably take your business if you're an owner of a pub or whatever, or they're going to swear at Swarco or the whatever the name is on the charger. So it's no good for anybody that happens. Do you think the charger quality itself, whatever the metrics that the hardware providers have, do you think that's going to improve as well, so that the chargers don't have to be maintained all the time and they're a bit more weather resistant or whatever? Do you think there's still a lot of work in there, or like what do you think is going to happen with that?
Yeah, no, I think that charging infrastructure, we have different types, right? Different types of infrastructure and different performance levels. You need to sort of appreciate that it's used by the public. Electricity, so you're plugging in two ends, so there's wear and tear there. And the more you sort of plug in and out, I mean, there's little pins, somebody might be, trying to jam it in from the side without really sort of taking care to put it nice and straight, and it bends the pins, and you don't realize that. The next driver comes along and says the charger's not working. Meantime, the pins buckle inside the device itself. You have, I think that driver behavior generally, just in terms of how to take care of connectors, sort of taking them out, putting them back into the holster, I think is all important. So drivers have a role to play as well, just making sure that the device is being well looked after. So just going back to my point in terms of it is a device that delivers power. And some of the equipment out there delivers incredibly high power. And you can imagine all these components within this machine that actually are delivering and have a role to play in delivering quite considerable levels of power. High power, but actually some of them quite consistently through the utilization throughout the day. So you naturally are always going to have, certain components that may from time to time, not frequently, but it will happen where a device will go down or something will happen within the charger that requires a service engineer visit. So I think that what I can say is that the 4 technology suppliers that we work with have heavily invested into testing facilities within their production departments, as well as their quality management sort of equipment and solutions to really sort of make sure that infrastructure before it is shipped to the market is thoroughly tested. So I can see quality improving. Quality has improved quite significantly across a lot of the different products out there. But we've seen those improvements because of the investments that the manufacturers have actually made. And this year I've been to 4 of our technology partner manufacturing facilities, and it's incredibly impressive. You know, I visit them probably every 6 months. And every 6 months I go there is a transformation of the manufacturing facility in such short periods of time. So as a driver, you won't necessarily realize that, but the manufacturers of the charging equipment are making some pretty significant investments into their manufacturing facilities, but also their quality control solutions and laboratories and climatic chambers and all sorts of very, very expensive facilities and equipment to ensure that the quality of their product is good in the marketplace. So I think it's important that you recognize that, I suppose, in terms of they're not sitting back and pushing boxes, out their warehouse, and they are genuinely making big investments to improve on efficiency within their production lines, but also quality.
That's good to hear, because I do remember the old Ecotricity chargers. I can't remember it's a French manufacturer. I can't remember what they're called, but they were kind of infamous for the failure rates. And yeah, like I say, I think things have improved since then. But you know what it's like when you have especially new EV owners. They just expect that everything's going to be fine when they just rock up to the charger, no failures, and it's just going to work. 100%.
Very true. We apply a lot of pressure, Greg, on our technology suppliers. We've got good relationships with them. But we do put quite a lot of pressure. We have high expectations for quality. So obviously the pressure that they have from the market, their distributors, actually forces them to make those big investments to ensure that they're giving us the quality. But then what can we do? So Swarco is a business the EV business, Swarco Smart Charging, we have 145 staff. 145. We're currently employing another 30 staff as we speak, just to support with growth and a sort of higher volume of activity across the business. So we've got quite a sizable EV infrastructure team in place. But a big part of that team is our service engineer base. So we have 32 service engineers that are strategically positioned throughout the country, Scotland, England, and Wales. These are 100% EVs that they're all driving, branded Swarco. So when we're on site, we're able to get on site quickly because we've got a good, strong service engineer team in place. We're able to test with an electric vehicle before we leave the site to ensure the charger is working and has been properly fixed. So those are quite big investments from our business. We're actually very proud to mention that we've only recently hit net zero. So we've achieved a net zero fleet across the smart charging business. So it's quite a significant milestone for us. So actually all of our staff now through the fleet are driving electric cars, which is a really great, strong message. But of course, that comes with big investment from us. It's been a real commitment from us for a number of years now to get to that point. But really, I suppose the message from our side is that from a Swarco perspective, we are making some pretty sizable investments into the operational side of our business to make sure, and that's service engineers, call center staff. So we now have 43 call center staff based in Dundee, servicing our drivers day to day. But more recently, in October last year, we set up a second-line technical support team, which is a team consisting of about 8 staff that remotely monitor our networks. So all of our charging infrastructure is remotely monitored 24/7. They proactively monitor the network throughout the day, so 24/7. And that has had quite a significant impact on the network's performance, because actually this team is constantly looking at the network. And as soon as infrastructure sort of goes red, okay, there's something wrong. They dial into it very quickly, and we're able to remotely diagnose on most occasions. And we implemented that in October last year, and we've seen some pretty significant results from that team we put in place. So these are investments that certainly Swarco have made, but I have no doubt that other infrastructure suppliers are also making similar investments into making sure that product quality and network reliability is there for drivers as well as the charge point owners.
Okay. Do you think there's still a lot that needs to be done from like the legislative perspective? I know we spoke about the fact that there's no canopies on chargers quite often, and I know like the Kate from Charge Safe is one of the people who kind of talks about accessibility but also safety, and that kind of ties in with having a canopy, having a good light, so you feel safe when you turn up to a charger. I'm a middle-aged white bloke, but I felt in the past like I'm not safe at a site, that I'm gonna have to run if somebody's attacking me here. Do you think that changes, and also signage and things like that, like discoverability? Is it still the case that if you have a canopy on site or you want to install the canopy, you need to have a different kind of permission basically to build the site? Of
course, you've got to go through planning permission because of the height of the canopy itself.
Okay.
I think it's going to be used for some applications. Some CPOs are using it today and will continue to do so. From a Swarco perspective, it's technology that we've deployed for a number of our charge point hosts. Dundee, one of them, Ayrshire, down in sort of Wales and a number of other parts of England as well. So, will it be sort of the solution deployed moving forward? I think for some applications it will, but it does come at quite a big cost.
Yeah.
And, obviously the CPOs will need to be factoring in that cost into their modeling to see if actually it makes sense from an investment perspective. I think there's a big focus on making sure that, of course, return on investment is considered as right up there, but also the experience of the electric vehicle driver, the customer experience. So I think as this market develops, if we see that canopies are positively seen by EV drivers, and it actually positively impacts the driver experience, then you may very well see CPOs start to deploy it more consistently across the infrastructure, their future sort of infrastructure growth plans.
Yeah, I think it would greatly help, but that's just my personal point of view.
For sure. I think lighting is really important. I think signage is very important, a very clear signage. And it's signage also to warn off fossil fuel vehicles parking in EV bays.
Yeah.
The term icing might be familiar to you. So I think that's really important in terms of clear signage, the bay marking, the lighting. All of those are really important to making sure that, as a driver, you feel safe and you feel attracted to going and using that site because it has all of those sort of in place.
Yeah. I mean, back in the early days of me driving cars, I would quite often wind up in a place where, there was a big car park, and I knew that the darkest corner closer to buildings is going to be where the charger is. It's just like, I just developed that sixth sense, and I didn't quite like that feeling, but that was the truth. I mean, things have improved certainly. You're right that I don't know what happened to them, but there was a a charge point operator at some point called Alpha Chargers, spelled Alpha with PH. Or no, there was with F. Sorry. I don't know what happened to them. I haven't seen them around in ages. But their sites, they were putting cameras as a default on all their sites, monitoring the charger, basically to kind of get rid of the icing, I should say, or people parking and not plugging in. I wonder if that will ever happen. I mean, going back to signage, one of the other things that I think people often ask me is like, why isn't there a sign saying this charger doesn't work or it's busy? When you're driving along the motorway or a road before you turn into the charger, why isn't there a charger saying, actually we're full, at the moment, go away, or the next charger is in 10 minutes this way, just simple signage like that. And I don't see private charging charging point operators putting that in, but I think that's one of those things that I think will have to be kind of coming down from the legislative
I agree.
Side of things.
There's nothing worse than arriving at a hub and all the bays are busy, but you have no idea how long it's going to take before one becomes empty.
Yeah, and where the other chargers are, because there might be one around the corner for all you know, right?
I suppose there's nothing worse when you're in a rush and you really need to understand that. If you've got lots of time, it's very different. So I've been in that position where I'm in a rush, but I've got no idea as to how long everyone's going to take there. So we are a traffic business. So Swarco is a large global traffic technology company. So a lot of the sort of motorway signage here in the UK is manufactured by us. So the variable speeds over the gantries, and then also the large sort of signs that give you certain warnings ahead are also manufactured by us, and a number of other different traffic technology solutions. We absolutely see the need for some form of digital signage, giving you a clear indication on the status of each of those parking bays in terms of time left before charge ends. So that's as visible to drivers coming on and actually seeing that, charger number 2 is going to be done in 2 minutes. I'll hang around, So I think that those technologies will form part of the EV infrastructure moving forward.
Okay.
Some stage. There are discussions and sort of there's a lot of innovation happening behind the scenes. And certainly we are looking at developing our traffic solutions into our EV infrastructure network and solutions, and the sort of end result of that will be technologies like this that will be very kind of good display, status display screens to EV drivers coming onto the sites.
Yeah, because it's one thing that when you drive, I don't have a Tesla personally, but like whenever I drive a Tesla, it knows where the Tesla chargers are and how many are occupied and all that. It's quite useful, but I don't see that ever happening on a global scale. With the way the OEMs work with the software, they're not the best usually at software or integrating other services. But just a simple sign on the motorway saying, there's 3 out of 10 bays are occupied. It doesn't take a genius to put that in. Like I say, and it would be great to see, since you guys are manufacturing the signs themselves already. I think that would be a good thing, because I hear that from people all the time. Is like, I wish I knew, or oh blimey, I have to download another app to find out where the next charger is. Like it's just all these simple things that I think. If I can, suggest that as an improvement, I think that that's a big thing. So speaking of Dundee, I've heard that they have a. I mean, they're obviously in Scotland, so the Charge Place Scotland, takes part in it. But I was told that there's a new hub coming up in Dundee. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Clippington Road hub is the biggest hub we've deployed in Scotland. So Dundee have a number of different hubs where you have solar carport solutions. You've got energy storage at some of their hubs. But this one specifically was rather unique. So effectively, it's a 30 charging station deployment with 60 bays. So effectively, 60 vehicles can charge simultaneously on the site. There are two different sides to the hub. So we have a publicly accessible side of the hub, but then we have the council fleet. So on the public side, we have 5 50-kilowatt rapid chargers. We have 150-kilowatt ultra-rapid charger. And then on the fleet side, we've got 100-kilowatt charging solution, and we have 2 50-kilowatt units, and then we have some overnight charging there. So we have 21 7-kilowatt AC posts.
Okay.
There's also quite a sizable solar array with the carports. So the solar actually sits on top of the carports, and there's that canopy as well as that solar covers 60 parking spaces. So at the public side, we have about a 37 kilowatt generation, and on the fleet side, we have 131 kilowatt generation. So obviously the fleet canopy with its solar array is larger than the public. So overall, we've got 168 kilowatts of generation.
That's quite big.
Yeah, it's quite sizable. Yeah, which is great. And then we have energy storage. So we've got 2 360 kilowatt lithium-ion second life electric vehicle batteries storage solutions. So quite sizable storage there. Obviously, just to capture that renewably generated energy transferred through into the energy storage device. And then we utilize the on-site energy generation, and we deliver that through the charging stations.
Okay.
So for me, the exciting point there on the storage is the second life battery. So actually, we're giving batteries a second life. And just from a sustainability perspective, it's really impressive product provided by one of our partners called Connected Energy.
Okay. Do you know what cars because they're presumably from electric cars? Do you know what make?
Number of different batteries.
Okay. So not just single one, and it's not like a Nissan Leaf or Renault Zoe. It's just mixture.
Specific batteries that they use there.
Okay.
And then we have the rainwater harvesting, and the rainwater harvesting is quite an exciting sort of addition to the hub. So it's effectively a system that collects the runoff of rain on the canopies. And it's basically that rain that it collects sent through a filtration system. And then on either side of the hub, there's a dispensing unit. So electric vehicle drivers can come onto the site. They can drink that water because it's fresh. It's gone through a purification process. Or they can utilize that water to clean their windscreens.
Okay. That's pretty cool, actually. I've never heard of anybody doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at all of those technologies there, the rain sort of water harvesting system, the energy storage, second life batteries, the solar on top of the carport, all that infrastructure. For us, it's a really strong, sustainable message. So that's why we're very proud. We're proud about deploying. We're proud to be deploying the site, but we're also very excited about its sustainability impact.
I mean, it sounds like quite a big site. Whereabouts is it? Because I'm not familiar with the geography of Dundee. Is it central, or is it on the sort of outskirts of Dundee?
Pretty central part of Dundee. It's actually at one of the local authorities' main depots. So that would be central Dundee in the city.
Okay. And obviously, I'm sure this was Dundee's council initiative. The question that everybody's going to be asking is why aren't other councils doing this, and how do I encourage my local council to even look at this sort of thing and make them be excited about such a thing? because Dundee is one of those places that I often hear as a sort of the leader in these sort of things, like clean tech. Do you know of any other councils who might be interested in this or working on this? I'm asking because one of the questions that I wanted to ask the Dundee Council people is there's this climate scorecard that I think it's a website with that, and Dundee is actually not the first or not number one on the list, but they're quite high up, right? And I seldom hear from other councils that are higher up than them about these sort of initiatives. I'm just kind of, just asking, I think this is the sort of the question that anybody hearing this would ask, off the top of the head. Because we're here to kind of, sing praises to Dundee, but at the same time, people live in other places as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably there's going back. So the history with Dundee is that in 2011, they really started to engage with the market. So that was early on. I mean, in 2011, there were only 1,000 electric cars on our roads. And I think they were the G-Wiz, the old G-Wiz model. And then eventually the Nissan Leaf came out and the Renault Zoe, etc. But,
Yeah, though IMEFs and all that in between as well.
Of course, I think Dundee City Council were one of the first owners of a IMEF. They had a few in their fleet. So they really pioneered this from the early days. When a lot of local authorities, a lot of just people around us were saying that the future is not electric vehicles. So those were the days where we as a business and as a team had to be very patient and believe that there was a future in this. So, but Dundee was, one of the local authorities who, from those early stages, recognized that actually they if they could really sort of be that pioneer and start to adopt electric cars and make that sort of active transition to a net zero fleet, that would be great from the local authority, from a sustainability perspective, carbon footprint perspective. So they implemented a team, and the team obviously consisting of Fraser, still today in that team, and Gary McRae, who were tasked to go out and really see how they could make that transition. It was a big, bold decision at the time because, obviously there's not many electric car options available at all. And so they did it, and they went out and they started to purchase electric cars and associated infrastructure. And I think it was almost as if they sort of caught the bug. And then it went on to the next vehicle. And then the next expansion of their fleet was electric cars. And I'm not entirely sure of the total electric car fleet today, but it's going to be well over 50%, I would have thought. But they're racing rapidly towards a zero emission fleet. But over the years, in those early days, they had buy-in from the senior decision makers within the council to really sort of support this with investment. And they've deployed a really impressive public charging network in the city. Really impressive. For a relatively small city, they have some of the largest and most impressive EV charging hubs. And I suppose the positive impact on that is that the uptake of EVs in Dundee is increasing quite significantly. A lot of the private taxi owners have made decisions to electrify their respective fleets. A lot of private businesses have also made transition over to an electric fleet. So, it's had a really positive impact on uptake. So, and really, that's in terms of sort of comparing why haven't the bulk of other local authorities done this. I think it's Dundee from the really early stages believed that there was a future for the electric car, and they invested into making sure that they were able to achieve that by getting that team in place and really getting the strategy defined and being involved and being responsible for deploying a number of different EV charging projects and schemes across the city. So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean Dundee are the only one that have really kind of done great things to date. There are a lot of local authorities in across the UK who have actually put in some really impressive infrastructure. But I still think if you look at kind of, the size of Dundee, they've probably put a lot more infrastructure sort of per capita versus other sort of cities and towns out there. There's lots of discussions happening behind the scenes. With a lot of local authorities are having discussions on their EV expansion plans. So some of those are very, very exciting. Some are just a kind of doubling up at the sites where there is infrastructure. Some of them are a lot more than that. So hubs with solar and storage. And so I do believe that we will start to see the positive impact on those sort of strategies by those various different local authorities emerge over the next, say, 6 to 12 months. We'll see more infrastructure deployed by other local authorities because of those sort of realignment on strategy discussions that they are having with regards to EV infrastructure. So, yeah, credit to Dundee, though, and if we look at when we decided to bid for the Charge Place Scotland network, Dundee, and just in terms of their commitment, we wanted to set up a business that was fully committed to, so set up a business in the area that was fully committed to the electrification of all modes of transport. And Dundee for us just came out on top when we had originally bid for the Charge Place Scotland network back in 2020. So today we've set up our business at the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park, which effectively is a Michelin manufacturing facility, and they decided to close down the manufacturing facility. So unfortunately, 850 staff lost their job as a result. So to mitigate the economic impact there, Dundee City Council invested 20 million into that park. We had the Scottish Government invest 20 million into that park, but we also had Michelin invest a further 20 million into that park. So 60 million to really transform that manufacturing facility into a sort of low carbon technology park. So it's quite impressive. So for us, that was a natural home to sort of plug the gap. We've got 45 staff employed in that facility today. In the next 12 months, it's going to go to 100. So if we get to that level, we can proudly say that we've plugged the gap of about 13.5% of those who lost their jobs due to the closing of the plant itself. But really, full credit to the Dundee team in terms of really driving the uptake of electric vehicles and other vehicles, not only just pedestrian vehicles, or domestic vehicles, shall I say, but buses and other modes of transport, being electrified, that being a key strategy for the Dundee City Council. But like I say, there are lots of other local authorities that have done some really exciting things with regards to charging infrastructure provision. And there's a lot that are refining their own respective strategies, and more infrastructure will be deployed over the coming months and years.
Yeah, but it seems like it has to come down from the council, because I know in my local area, for instance, just as I think they're leaving it up to private investors to do things. There isn't like a strong leadership from the council itself. They're basically like, if somebody comes and wants to invest, we'll be open to it. Otherwise, we're not going to do anything about it, or not much anyway. It's frustrating when I hear from local residents that they would love to have electric car, but they live in a terraced house. They don't have a drive, and they're unable to charge the car. I mean, things have changed in Tunbridge now, luckily. But is there any? I know things are run slightly differently in Scotland, but in Dundee specifically, how do they deal with it? Because I presume they get the AC charging points from you guys as well, right? The domestic chargers.
In terms of on-street residential, I mean, the local authority have done a few. There's been sort of small-scale on-street residential schemes applied by the local authority just to kind of test the solution. So they have a pop-up bollard solution provided by a different company, which effectively, comes sort of out of the ground and it's a pole effectively that you plug in and use to charge. But the local authority will be looking at this on-street residential scheme, and we will start to see Dundee, as well as lots of other local authorities across Scotland, England, and Wales, start to deploy on-street residential charging infrastructure.
Yeah, you mentioned the batteries on that site in Dundee. Do you think that's going to happen more and more now on the on sites that people are going to be charging point operators or landowners are going to deploy batteries, whether to harvest the solar energy or whatever, or whether it's just to like GridServe do, bid on the grid itself and make money that way as an alternative?
Yes, I believe that energy storage will play a part. It'll play a key role in supporting with the expansion of the EV infrastructure on a lot of the sites. Because we're at that place now where we're deploying anywhere up to 20 bays, and obviously there's a DNO supply that comes in, and of course those are different costs. Some reasonable, going all the way up to extreme. But actually, from a power availability perspective, if you've maxed out in that particular area, and you absolutely need to be expanding the infrastructure, then we have to be turning towards energy storage solutions. Even before that point, we see some of the sites where there's a kind of 10 bay deployment, 200 kilowatts per bay, and the DNO cost is over £1 million. That's quite significant.
Yeah.
It's way beyond the kind of the banding that a CPO would invest into for that level of infrastructure. So even for those applications, I do see energy storage and on-site renewable generation playing its part to support with making sure that infrastructure is actually deployed on that site. It's a good quality site, that is. So, yes, I'm one that is positive about these other supporting technologies like on-site renewable generation, like energy storage, because if we really want to go to sort of the mass adoption of electric vehicles, we're going to need to deploy a lot more infrastructure. Significant amount of more infrastructure will be required to be deployed. So other supporting technologies like storage, like on-site generation, will absolutely play their part to support with those expansion plans. I feel.
I fully support that. Like to me, it should be a no-brainer to when you have over 10 chargers or even over 5 to have a battery storage on site to kind of help smooth out the peaks and troughs, right? And have a solar canopy. Like it's just it's mad to me that I think Fastnet was like one of the first companies in Europe to do that, and it was madness to me that I haven't seen this before. Across the UK. And
that goes back to my point there, Greg, is that because what we're seeing is that perhaps some of the DNO costs are reasonable at this stage because it's relatively small deployment. As we're not at mass adoption. So it's relatively small deployment of infrastructure today, but it's enough for today's market. So if the DNO cost is reasonable and in line with the CPO's modeling, then the business case for an energy storage solution to be deployed there, that will be a challenge. Because actually the storage solutions come at a cost. They're not sort of low cost, cheap solutions. So if you weigh up the kind of the DNO costing, if it's reasonable for a certain application, which is in most cases today, because we're not deploying very, very big numbers, deploying sort of reasonably lowish numbers from a infrastructure perspective, then actually you don't need storage. But when we really start to get to sort of significant DNO costs, great site, really want to get infrastructure deployed here. If we were to pull power from the DNO at a much sort of reduced sort of requirement in terms of kVA, then ultimately we could use on-site generation and then energy storage to support infrastructure being deployed there. Then in that case, it needs to be considered. But what's really important is that the business case makes sense for investing into these technologies as well.
Overall, it sounds like the future looks bright, and we're not going to have. I mean, we are matching the number of cars on the road when it comes to infrastructure, or at least there is a hope that people will stop complaining. Sorry, about the there not being enough infrastructure, because I'm sure you'll agree that there is plenty of infrastructure. It's just whenever there's a peak, there's always complaints. But that's just the way the life is, isn't it?
No, probably just to close off, I think leaving it on a positive is that I think rest assured the CPOs and various different local authorities are fully committed to expanding their respective networks. So we will see a considerable amount of infrastructure deployed over the years, months and years to come. And I think if you're considering to purchase an electric car, you don't understand that, and you think that actually all the infrastructure we've got out in the field today is it. It's certainly not the case. Okay, so there is going to be a lot more infrastructure deployed over the months and years to come, which should give those that are possibly on the fence of whether to go sort of into the electric vehicle or sort of remain on the fossil fuel driven vehicle. The reassuring message, certainly from my side as a leader of a charging infrastructure business, is that there is a lot more infrastructure that is planned to be deployed.
And there's plenty already out there. It's just sometimes hard to find, but I'm sure that's going to change. Thank you, Justin. Well, that's it for the episode 44. If you've lasted this long, you're awesome. Don't forget to hug each other more, fight for the cause you believe, and high fives and all that. And I completely didn't steal that from somebody else, but I just love it. And by the way, if you've listened this far and you want to be awesome to me, just say high five to me when you see me next. I'll get you. I'll understand you've been listening for the entirety of the episode. As always, check all the doobly-doobs underneath the episode, release notes, and if you want to, for some reason, share something with me, just takeitev@gmail.com or takeitev at, I think it's mastodon.social on the socials. Anyway, thank you, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.